How do you keep going? Why don't you quit? It was an email I read in a tent in the middle of Antarctica, and I was at my wit's end when I read it, physically and emotionally spent. See, myself and my two teammates were attempting to ski from the edge of the Antarctic continent all the way to the geographic South Pole solely under human power. Now, what that means is that everything we had to survive on this 1,134 kilometer journey we had in our sleds. And now these sleds weighed upwards of 250 pounds. So imagine taking your fridge at home, putting that on a sled, attaching that to yourself, and starting to haul that across the continent. And the whole time, starting on the edge of the sea ice, heading up to the South Pole itself, the pole is at 10,000 feet. So every single step we took was uphill. And of course, the winds blow down from the pole, the catabatics, right into our face. So I was physically at my limit. But when I read this email, it was 3 days before Christmas. And at the time, I had a 5-year-old daughter and a 3-year-old daughter at home, 3 days before Christmas. I remember speaking to them every day on the sat phone, and I was just emotionally spent by the idea I was going to be spending it away from my kids for the first time. And they had no idea why Daddy was doing what Daddy was doing, trying to ski to the South Pole. They just knew that Daddy wasn't going to be there for Christmas. So I was physically and emotionally spent when I read that email message. Now, I'd like to pause here for a second to give you a sense of what this environment is all about, Antarctica. It's the coldest, it's the windiest, it's the driest continent in the world. There's been temperatures recorded as low as 89.6 degrees Celsius in Antarctica. The winds blow at 320 kilometers per hour down from the pole. And what a lot of people don't realize, it's the driest continent in the world, drier than the Sahara Desert. There's areas in Antarctica that have not seen moisture in over 2 million years. So this is the environment I'm operating in. 8, 10, 12, 14 hours a day of skiing. Finally, we'd set up our tent in the wind, get inside, chop snow blocks because we'd have to melt that in order to get our food and water. It'd take hours. And finally, at the end of it, you'd wrap yourself up in your down bag and you'd have this moment of reprieve. And we had over 10,000 school kids following us on this journey. And thanks to satellite technology, we were able to connect to them when we were out there. And it was this little moment of reprieve that I was able to answer their questions. And most of them were pretty simple, like, is it cold? Yeah, it's pretty cold. It's pretty cold out here. What do you guys eat? Well, we're eating this crazy diet, eating 8,000 calories a day, eating chunks of butter, quite literally half the size of a Rubik's Cube, just trying to get as much energy in our systems as possible. And what wildlife do you see out there? Well, there is no wildlife. There's nothing, absolutely nothing on the continent. The only life exists on the perimeter. And probably a good thing too, because we're out there for 2 months in the same clothes and same underwear, so it's probably a good thing there was no one around for us on our journey. And then I read that email message. How do you keep going? Why don't you quit? From a young guy, Sammy, at the Riverside Resolve Detention Center in Chicago, this kid was a strike 2 offender. One more mistake, this kid was going to be bumped up to adult court, bumped up potentially to adult prison. So when this kid asked me, how do you keep going? Why don't you quit? I remember thinking to myself, this means a lot more to him than me simply skiing to the South Pole. He was asking something more. He had connected with us in a way that he probably hadn't connected with many. And it was something that sat with me. I couldn't answer his question. I remember enough so that my teammates said, so why aren't you writing something? I just have to think this one through. It's bigger than that. And you see, what Sammy didn't realize, my journey hadn't started 2 weeks earlier on the Rhone ice shelf. It actually started 35 years before in Montreal as a 9-year-old boy. See, my brother and I got separated from my parents in a large department store in the city center. It was closing time, it was February, there was a storm outside, and an overzealous security guard decided to kick us out instead of help us find our parents. And I remember that moment. This little guy, I'm so anxious. I mean, I'm outside, I'm 9 years old, and all I'm thinking about is mom. I want to be with my mom, and where's home? And I wasn't even sure how we got here. We got here on bus or metro. I didn't know where home was. It was snowing, there was lights, I was cold. And then my brother started to cry. I remember looking down at him and him just looking up at me and going, Kev, I want to go home. My brother was 5. I remember at that moment thinking to myself, well, I'm the big boy here, so it's like, I'll get us home, Mike. And I started to walk. And looking back on it now, I had no idea where I was going. And I do remember that I saw this building called the Chateau Champlain in Montreal. And the Chateau Champlain has these semicircular windows. And I remember as a family, we called that the cheese grater. And I knew the cheese grater was not near my home. So I turned around. I started walking in the other direction. And looking back on it now, I would have passed by St. Catherine Street and I wouldn't have recognized St. Catherine Street. And I would have passed de Maisonneuve Street, and I would not have recognized de Maisonneuve Street. But then I saw Sherbrooke Street, and I recognized Sherbrooke Street. And I thought to myself, I live close to a Sherbrooke Street. If I follow this Sherbrooke Street, maybe I'll find home. So I did. We started to walk, and we walked, and we walked, and we walked for hours, and we slip into apartment buildings to get warm. And after about 3 hours, I finally saw a toboggan hill that we used at Murray Hill. And shortly after that, we came home. Remember, with the mind of a 9-year-old boy, seeing a police car in front of my house, and me thinking to myself, there's a police car in front of my house. I wonder what's going wrong. Having no idea. Got home to some very relieved parents and very relieved police officers. And it was a transformational moment for me as a child. It was the scariest moment of my life, but it was also the most empowering. And it was the start of my journey as an adventurer. Because shortly after that, I had this dream of skiing to the South Pole. So there I was, transport myself back to Antarctica, sitting in my tent. How do you keep going? Why don't you quit? For 35 years. That question has been stuck in my head. I made it the next 2 weeks. I made it to the South Pole. We did it in 33 days, 23 hours, and 55 minutes. We took almost a week off the previous world record. But I made it over that period of time. What was it that allowed me to do that? And I've been thinking about that, about personal performance. What has allowed me to do that? Without a doubt, I was gritty. I must have been gritty. I must have been resilient over that period of time. Obviously, I had a goal. I had purpose in what I was doing. I was able to, over those 35 years, the ups and downs, I've been able to stay positive through it all. And just recognizing, being able to reframe situations quickly when I see something negative into something positive. This ability of understanding that challenges, in fact, challenges are a way to get better, not to really set you back. And knowing the important things to hold on to and to let go. And what's interesting about that, and the more I reflected on it, is all these aspects are as important to all of us as it is to me as an adventurer. No matter what you want to do, you have to do these things. And it got me thinking about that, about this wild wisdom garnered in the adventure world and how relative and how important it is to everyone, to the business professional. So I went deep on that for the last 2 years with a neuroscientist, writing Wild Success, the 7 key lessons business leaders can learn from extreme adventurers. And we looked at that in detail. And we interviewed colleagues, interviewed among the best adventurers in the world, and realized that these people, these paragons of performance, have things they can share. Their abilities, their superpowers, in many ways, are something that we can learn from, that we can use in whatever we do. I had this opportunity to speak to Mark Matthews. Mark is one of the best big wave surfers in the world. He surfs Jaws, Nazare. Nazare is a 100-foot tall wave. Think of it, 10-story building, surfing that in Portugal. And his superpower is his ability to cognitively reappraise, to reframe situations really quickly. I talked to Roz Savage. Roz is the greatest ocean rower in the world, 4 world records, an amazing woman who recognized and was on a journey to find her purpose, and in that process ended up leaving a cheating husband, sold her house, left her job in pursuit of what her purpose was. And she found that through her ocean rowing. I spoke with Rex Pemberton. Rex is an Everest summiter. He's also a wingsuit flyer. He's so innovative. And now he has this carbon fiber jet wing, and he believes in human propulsion. It's out there. He's always innovating. I spoke to ocean rower Paul Gleason about grit, to Matt McFadden about growth mindset, about Lisa Blair and her journey around Antarctica, where she dismasted in the middle of the Southern Ocean, the most horrific ocean in the world, on the verge of being sunk, somehow had the resilience to stay afloat and survive. And finally, I had a moment to reflect myself on my background. I'm an architect. I'm a writer. I'm a dad. But I'm also an adventurer. An adventurer that's managed to get 2 world records to my name over the years. It's understanding balance. And that's something I feel strongly that I've been able to do, recognizing the things that are important to me and pursuing them hard, and other things that aren't, and just letting them go. So, if you want to perform at your best, if you want to cognitively reappraise quickly, if you want to understand the power of purpose and recognize and double-click on that, if you want to continuously be able to innovate, if you want to have passion and perseverance, if you want to be able to recognize that challenges, in fact, are opportunities for us to learn. Criticism is an opportunity for us to learn. If you want to understand that a balanced life means embracing some things and letting other things go, then to be at your best, to perform at your best, I'd say think like an adventurer. Thank you very much.